Hello. Welcome back to the show, guys. It's me and Jeremy today. What a surprise, I know. Anyway, like we discussed last week, today we're going to be talking about our favorite book series in an attempt to find the best one. So, before we begin, since I feel like it's a little different, what makes you pick up a series and what makes you stay with it? What makes you drop it? It's a little different than that standalone single time commitment.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I pick up a series. A lot of times I pick up series based on recommendations because it's kind of a thing that people like to talk about. So
It's fair.
if I'm going to make the investment on something that's long, I tend to lean towards ones that are already out, where there's at least several books in the series. If it's going to be a long series, or like
Right.
at least two out of the three already out, with the next one coming relatively soon, because I hate waiting in between.
I do too.
That's the mistake I made with the Kingkiller Chronicles, where I don't know how long I've been waiting, years. But a lot of times it'll go off recommendations, or like I read the summaries, and if I feel like it's something that's going to last for a whole series, then I can make the investment in it. In terms of putting them down, the things that make me put them down is when I feel like I'm not going anywhere. That's the most annoying thing. Like, I can even deal with a book that has flaws if I feel like I'm making progress. The characters are growing, and I'm not just stagnating. But there's a lot of books out there that, like, by come the end of the second book or into the third book, I feel like I'm basically where I was in book one with everybody,
Yeah.
or it resets, which is really annoying because they run out of character arc, and they're like, well, what's the best thing that I can do to fix this? Is let's set the characters back and make them regrow, which is really annoying.
Right. Yeah, it's good. I think for me, part of it's also time. Like if you have a book series that's like even just 3 books or more, and they're all like 900 pages each or more, you're just like, I don't got time for that. That's an effort. It's gonna take me a month. I'm not doing that. And then I find something else. It's a little more time conscious friendly there. And I agree. Like I think sometimes you need to see the characters growing. I see that a lot where, especially in standalone novels where the characters are static, but I feel like it's more of an issue when you know there's tons of time passing between novels and within each novel, and you see it happen with a series and the character is static. It's a problem. And I think the other thing too is when the characters are just bland, like stuff's happening to them and you just can't bring yourself to care about them. And the characters you like are like these tertiary characters that show up every like 300 pages for like 30 pages maybe, and you're like, I love you, but you're too small to make me like, reread things. I think I'll mention that in the honorable mentions because there is a book that I have in mind where that's a big issue.
It's like the main characters are like along for the ride, and you're kind of stuck with them and riding through. It's like, oh, it seems like a cool world. It seems like a lot of cool stuff happening here, with some cool characters, but I'm stuck with these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect book in mind. So that's definitely an issue. Like writing that just, goes downhill after a while. Like it starts off strong, like, yeah, I have an idea and it's awesome. I'm gonna tell you all about it and bring you into my world. And then like book 4, you're just like, what is this? They're obviously not enthused about writing anymore. They just want a paycheck. And so
I agree on several points that you made, like the one with time investments. The reason why I have never picked up the Wheel of Time series, even though I've gotten. I know you don't like the Wheel of Time series.
I started the first book and it was literally 200 pages of, oh no, this thing is after us, we have to run. 200 pages, people.
I've heard it's really good, and I've heard that the last, I think it was 2 or 3 that
2 books.
2 books that Sanderson wrote.
Yeah.
The ones that Sanderson wrote, a lot of people say they're the best ones in the series, but it's like book 13 and 14 or something like that, and I don't have the wherewithal to start that.
I know. No willpower.
No.
It's okay.
I mean, I still got a whole long list of series that I could finish in a lot less time than that.
And I'm adding to it.
Yeah.
So he's an out, guys.
Yeah. She just gifted me like 6 or 7 books on Audible, and now it's like.
Technically, it's 5 novels and then a trilogy. So that's 8.
That's 8 books. And they're onto the top of my list.
Because I'm importance.
Yeah. And the other thing is like what you're saying with the writing when it goes downhill. I feel like a lot of people have a great idea for their first book, and that first book they're like determined to make it a trilogy, or the first book does really well and they decide that they're going to make it into a trilogy. I feel like there's not a lot of 2-book series. Actually, one of the ones I'll mention, an honorable mention, only has 2 books, and there's not going to be any more. But the I feel like they have a great idea for the first one, and you're like, oh, this is an amazing book. And then you go to the second book, and you're like, oh, this is not quite as good. And then you go to the third one, and you're like, oh, what happened? like you just ran out of ideas, or like the world grows because everybody, people who watch like shonen anime or read shonen manga, there's this thing called power creep, like where it just things keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more important, and a lot of authors can't write that very well. So like they start off with a smaller story that has like, this is their point, their characters are going to get to this place, and then they kind of expand the world bigger and bigger with each book, and you realize that they're not good at expanding the world, and it just like the world doesn't organically grow. It's just like, and then this thing's there just so they can have something to go up against. That happens a lot.
Yeah. You good?
Yeah.
All right. So now the fun part. We are going to talk about our favorite books. Series. The series.
We're doing honorable mentions first, or are we going right into the tops?
What do you want to do?
I mean, I always have several honorable mentions.
I know. You outdo me. Sorry.
You want to start? You only have like one?
I have one. So this is probably not a surprise. It's the Outlander series. And this is why it's an honorable mention. I think, well, the first novel, Outlander, starts off like, it's probably one of the slowest books I've ever read in my life. Like, I was just like, oh my God. Like, the first 30 pages are absolute torture. And then it's like just amazing. It's a really good blend of romance, history, or historical fiction, drama, fantasy, and the prose is fairly strong. It's a really nicely constructed story. But as you go through, they kill off all the good characters, surprise, surprise. And then, like, you look at Claire's relationship with Jamie, and you're like, I don't really get why they're together. Like, I sit there and I'm like, you like having sex, and that's kind of it? Like, I don't know. And so there's that. And then they're just boring characters. Like, she and Jamie are just like, I really liked like Bree for a while when she was introduced, and then she kind of went downhill too. And then the only people I liked were like little Ian and I think it's John Gray. Yeah, I'm going with John Gray. It might be James. I'm pretty sure it's John. But he's like such a minor character, and I was like, there's no reason for me to keep reading this. Like these ridiculously long novels with this ridiculously small print that take me a ridiculously long time. Not only because I didn't like the characters as much and I couldn't feel invested in them, but because I just saw her recycling ideas. Like she was running out of things to do. Like it was like every book after a while there was like a rape, and then there was a kidnapping, and then there's like a murder mystery, and I'm like, I'm over it. Like, I'm so over it. I think I got into like book 6 and I was like, this is just, I can't anymore. I think she's up to, I think 9 or 11, and then she's doing like a novella too, just about like Jamie or Claire's. I don't even know.
Milking it.
It's a lot of books. They've been written over a really long period of time, and they just, as far as I'm concerned, start off strong and just like plummet down a very large, nearly 90-degree incline. It's just not good. Starts off strong though, and they have a TV show which did well.
Really? Oh, well, that's on
like
Stars.
Yeah, on Stars.
Yeah, sounds like a Stars thing. So that's the Outlander series. That's your honorable mention, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 honorable mentions.
Of course you do.
I'm just gonna briefly touch on each one. I promise I'll be brief. The one of them is one of my favorite books, and I would have put it in my favorite book category last week, but it's technically part of a series, so I couldn't. The first book in the Cheque files, which is The Rook, which they're now also making a series.
Of course they are.
I also think it's on Stars, actually. It's very different. Like we're only in episode 3, and they've already changed a lot. But it's fun. But the books, the first book is amazing. Like I absolutely love it. I listened to it on audio, and the person who the voice actor who plays like reads the whole thing has a weird like a Welsh accent, and she speaks in questions. Like she always like it always like she sounds like she's asking a question no matter when she talks, and it took a really long time to get used to that. Um, and but once I did, that I could never not. That's the character's voice right there. It's like it's so unique. The story's really interesting. It's kind of like um, government espionage meets the X-Men because they're like it's people. It's like a government organization that has people with special powers, and they kind of keep other people with special powers under wraps. And there's like a rival group called the Grafters, which like modify their bodies and things like that. And the powers are really interesting. There's one character that's like 4 separate bodies, and they all share a consciousness. They're called Gestalt, and it's really interesting. Just the way they're all the powers are so unique. The second book I didn't like as much. The second book was called Stiletto, and it followed a completely different character that was not in the first book. And Miffany, who's the main character of the first book, was ancillary. Like she was in a couple of scenes, but she was not a focus at all, which is really annoying. I don't understand why you'd have a book where you have a primary character and then she's basically not in the second one, which is kind of the thing I didn't like. That's what keeps it a top series. Kingkiller Chronicles. The prose is really good. Like it's really well written. It probably has one of my favorite single paragraphs in any book that I've ever read. The Silence has 3 parts, and you'll know it when you read it when you get around to it. But the
5 years from now.
It's by Patrick Rothfuss, and he is really an amazing, talented writer. The thing that keeps it off my top series is I wish he would write the next book. It's been a long time. He's not quite George R.R. Martin, but he's getting there. He's also got a big beard and stuff, so he's like, he could get there. That kind of bothers me. The plot isn't the best. The plot's the main character is very, what's it called? Gary Stu, the male version of Mary Sue, where he's like kind of good at everything without really trying all that hard. I mean, that's kind of the story that he's trying to tell, but that kind of bothers me a little bit. The writing just really keeps it going. So I'm not really a big fan of the plot. And I met Patrick Rothfuss in real life, and he wasn't very nice. So that kind of keeps him off my top list.
Totally understandable.
Yeah. My next one is the Mithermage trilogy, which is by Orson Scott Card. Also an author that is not a very good person. He's actually a very bad person. But the content, if you divorce the author from it, it's really interesting. It's like a interesting magic system. It's a take on the different gods, the different pantheons around the world, that they were actually from another world. And they like traveled here and got stuck here, and that kind of made all of the legends that we have, like the Norse pantheon and like the Persian pantheon and the Greek and the Roman and all that came from like these people that were the Mithermage. It's a typical Orson Scott Card protagonist where the kid's like 11 or 12, which all his books basically have that. But he does a really good job of writing those kind of characters. That's why he kind of sticks with it, I guess. So that one's an honorable mention. The thing that keeps it off is I don't like it as much as his other series, which I'm going to talk about in my tops. And I didn't want to have him on there twice. My last 2 are the Bone Season. Bone Season is like a story about spirits and demons, and it has a really interesting mechanism where people can fight with spirits, where they can like coil them and like throw them at people, and it's really cool, just the concepts behind it. It got kept off my top because I don't remember what happened in the 3rd book, which means it couldn't have been that impactful on me. I remember the first 2. I don't remember the 3rd one, even though I read it. So I feel like that's a bad sign. And my last one is The Reckoners, which is Brandon Sanderson. He's also on my list with a different series. We actually have the book for that one.
Sorry.
We've found out that, or I found out today, that things are backwards when you put them on the webcam, which she already knew. But that one's a really cool one because it's like it's like superheroes, but what happens if superheroes were evil? Like all of the like people got powers. This thing called Calamity showed up, and it was like this. We both like the series, but it was like the this thing called Calamity, which is like this giant burning star in the sky, showed up, and then everybody
It's red.
started having powers, but having powers
Not
kind of,
everybody.
well, I mean, a bunch of people.
A bunch of people.
Yeah, I guess it was by relative terms, it's a small percentage of the population, but there seems to be a lot of them. And they just having their powers and using their powers makes them like geared towards being evil and very self-serving. So they basically become supervillains. So it's what happens if humans have to fight against the superheroes. And Steelheart is the name of the first book, and that's the main. He's like the Superman of the series. He's like immune to everything, and he can shoot energy blasts. He's like Superman meets Goku on steroids. And so it's like, what happens if Superman was evil? So.
Well, he has the metal powers.
Oh yeah. He can like turn huge. He turned the whole city into metal, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nukago.
Yeah. Nukago.
Come on. Come on.
I forgot that. I remember the energy blast and the impervious thing, and they just stacked everything on top of him.
And he can fly.
So I guess now we're done with honorable mentions. We move on to our tops. You want to go?
All right. So starting off this list is The Arithmetist, which we did mention last week. Technically, it is the only book in the series right now, so kind of weird to put it on this list, but it's supposed to be part of a series under the same name. I'll read the back for you guys. It says, more than anything, Joel wants to be a arithmetist. Arithmetists have the power to infuse life into two-dimensional figures known as chalklings. They're humanity's only defense against the wild chalklings, merciless creatures that leave mangled corpses in their wake. As the son of a lowly chalk maker at Armedius Academy, Joel can only watch as arithmetist students learn the magical art that he would do anything to practice. Then students start disappearing, kidnapped from their rooms at night, leaving trails of blood. Assigned to help the professor who is investigating the crimes, Joel and his friend Melody find themselves on the trail of an unexpected discovery, one that will change arithmetics and their world forever. So, what did I like about this? I felt like it was a really good pace. Like, Sanderson lets things unravel, and then like in a whirlwind, all this stuff happens, and you're like, whoa! And then he kind of does it again. I like the magic system a lot. I think it was explained well. There are a lot of diagrams. Let me just bring one up for you really quick. See like this, where they have all the things explained with like little figures. I mean, it reminded me of like the Chalk Zone. Do you remember that show from like the 90s? Yeah. But better. I really like the battles he described between the different arithmetic teams. That was really innovative and different. I don't feel like you see a lot of magic systems that are basically one-dimensional. Two-dimensional?
Yeah, two-dimensional.
I don't know why I said one-dimensional, guys. That was bad. You didn't hear that. Anyway, I liked the fact that there were a lot of well-rounded, interesting, relatable characters. For example, Joel is, for whatever reason, obsessed with arithmancy to the point where he kind of ostracizes himself from the rest of the kids at the academy. He wishes his friends were a lot more interested in the things he were interested in, but finds that he really doesn't have any friends because he's a little weird for pursuing this interest, which he has no way of becoming a part of because he didn't, quote, pass the entrance exam, more or less. Essentially, I don't know how you describe that process.
Yeah.
Like, I guess you would call it as an exam.
They have like a rite of passage. Like, I mean, if anybody read Divergent, it's like that thing where they have a ceremony where you have to like get assigned your house, but it's similar to that where they all have to go do this ceremony, and it's kind of determined if you're going to be a arithmetist or not.
And he didn't really pass that because he didn't go, and he's still kind of hung up on this. Yeah, his father died, so he had to like kind of deal with that and didn't go to the ceremony and did it like a few months after or something, and just didn't make it, and he was kind of hung up on that. Frustrated that he didn't get in, but what can you do? So he's that. He, like a lot of other teenagers and people in general, I feel like prioritizes the things he's like. So he's always studying arithmetics and like the history and the different defenses and the offenses, and ignoring things like math and history and whatever else he should be doing. So, relatable, someone you could definitely understand. There are a lot of people who deal with some sort of ostracization, in school or work. So that was good. I liked how Melody was really free spirited. She also is relatable in the sense that she has older siblings who were like the best. Her family is like, really good with grammatics. Almost everyone is, I think everyone in her family was an
Yeah.
arithmetist. And she was trying to get out of their shadow the entire book because she can't really draw very well. She's good with, some parts of mathematics, chalkings, but drawing the circle is just like beyond her. She's really bad at it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they do a really good job of those two characters kind of complementing each other, which
that
is
too.
really well done because like she's really good with the drawing the chalklings and things like that, and he's really good at kind of the form like the tactics and the formation and the circles and things like that. So it's kind of they balance each other out in that and in personality.
Yeah, I also like the fact that she's like really into unicorns and ice cream, like a normal person. That was great. I also really liked Fitch, which is a professor they work under. He's like the kindly old man, that kind of trope thing going on, an archetype. But he is also someone who cracks horribly under pressure, which I thought was nice to see because he had like all these accolades. He was, this really well respected professor, and he just could not do anything under pressure, like in competitions or when he had to deal with the wild chalklings. It was just a
Yeah.
disaster. So that was nice to see, like a professor who just isn't perfect.
Um,
That's all for
yeah, I mean,
me.
and Sanderson in general is good at writing flawed characters that aren't flawed to the point where it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
And he manages to write heroic characters really well without to the point where they're ridiculously heroic, where it's unrealistic. He balances it out really well. And like as we talked about last week with Warbreaker, um, he's really good with his magic systems. Like the reason why he can have diagrams and charts for his magic system is because he plans them all out. They're airtight. Like you can't nobody's gonna pick it apart and say that it fits the plot or he just like because a wizard did it. He is so spot on when he designs new magic systems, and it's always fresh. Like something based on drawing chalk is like who would come up with that? And he does such a good job.
I mean, it's kind of like summoning, but
Yeah,
modified in a way.
but he does such a good job. Like we would talk about, I'll talk about when I talk about Mistborn, but just the how he's makes you keep track of the fights so well, and he does it with the chalk, like sending the chalk lines and everything all over the place. It's really cool.
With diagrams as well,
Mhm.
oftentimes.
The diagrams are very helpful. As somebody who I'm a big Audible person, like I listen to it on audiobook, and I wish I rented the like borrowed from the library the book so I could see the diagrams
Diagrams are good.
because it's actually kind of necessary, which is why they're in there.
Yes. This is definitely a one where you want the physical copy, not
Yeah.
an Audible thing.
Um, I guess I'll follow up with one.
Okay.
Let's bleed right into another Sanderson book. I'll just go right into
Of course.
Mistborn.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just stay on the same track.
Series.
Yeah.
This one actually has more than one.
Yeah, it's true. The Mistborn trilogy was my first introduction to Sanderson. His first book was The Final Empire, and his first book in the series, and that was the one that I went through it and I got hooked immediately. The characters were amazing. I loved the magic system. It's probably my favorite magic system. Allomancy. It's about like ingesting and burning different metals, and the allomancers burn them in their body, and that allows them the consumption of them allows them to do different things. Each metal does a different effect. I'm not going to list through many of them, but like some of them make you stronger. Some of them make you able to push and pull yourself so they can like kind of control attractive forces. There's like a lot of different things that they're able to do, heighten your senses, feel emotion, like make people's emotions go up and down. There's a lot of different things that they can do, and it's all charted out there. It's all got its rules. There's things about mixing them. They also have a couple of other systems like feruchemy is feruchemy. One of
A
like
big word we can't pronounce.
yeah, the one that like Sazed and his people did, which is interesting also. And they all kind of like play together so well. and the battles, because people are using these abilities. The Mistborn are the ones who can use all of the metals. They're not specific um, burners, so they can only burn one metal. They can do all of them, so they'll just ingest like a capsule of a bunch of um, metal shavings, and they'll just be able to fight each other. And they're jumping around, they're attracting to metal, they're like pushing and pulling, and there's so many different things that they can do. You'd think that every battle that they got into would be a chaotic mess, but it's really easy to track. Um, the the characters are really well done. The setting is really interesting. I what?
Well, Vin's kind of bland. So is what was the prince's name? Elend.
Yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, they're kind of blah.
But I like Kelsier's crew in the beginning.
Well, yeah,
That's
they're
really
good,
cool.
but yeah.
What's the other guy that becomes more important in the third book? Spook is that his name?
Yeah, I think so.
The one who becomes like the
The
savant or
Tin-Eye?
whatever, the Tin Eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
It's been a while, guys.
yeah, I mean, Vin has her issues. I didn't like her as much towards the end of the series. I liked Elend better as the series went on. I liked Vin less as the series went on. But I don't think either of them got to the point where they were detracting from the story. I really liked Kelsier.
He was cool.
And I liked the world that they built.
He built?
What?
It's one person writing this world.
Hey, you got me on this last week. The world. I just think the characters are building the world, and really they are. There's a lot of books that have this Dark Lord trope where it's like, oh, we're gonna tackle the evil empire, and that's like our main focus. But none of them really focus on what happens after.
That's true.
And that's kind of the thing that made this one unique. And I really liked it.
Yeah.
Can't recommend it highly enough.
I think the only thing that detracts just from a stylistic standpoint was I feel like this is one of Sanderson's earlier works, so just the writing is a little clunkier than his newer books. It's not
What,
as
like Stormlight?
Yeah, like the Stormlight Archives. Like it's not as fluid. There are a lot of just awkward sentences, things that just don't sound pretty. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but it's not, I feel like, as strong as the Stormlight Archives, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the Stormlight Archives are his best example of prose, like how he writes. Like that, I think he got a lot better at mixing. Also, the magic system in Stormlight Archives doesn't require as much fine detail explaining all the time.
It's looser.
Yeah, like because it's epic fantasy, which an epic fantasy tends to. That's like his what he deems it like his try at epic fantasy, and that tends to lean more towards a softer magic system. His is still a hard magic system, but it's towards the more malleable end of it. I feel like he finds a nice balance with his prose rather than his description. And in Mistborn, it's a lot of description. Like in order to let you know what's happening at all times, he has to talk about it a lot.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Mistborn.
So my second series is the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. It's a YA series. The easiest way to explain it would be like basically these two sisters, Tella and Scarlet Donatella, everyone just calls her Tella, Dragna, is their last name, just want to go to this essentially blend of a carnival Renaissance fair and a fairy tale thing called Caraval, which is run by this man named Legend. It's basically like a mystery. You get clues and you go through this event trying to get to the end, because at the end you get basically one wish, and that's your prize, and it's whatever you want it to be. But the thing is that this world is so enchanting that as you go along, you forget it's not real. And in the first book, Scarlett's trying to recover her sister who was taken, and in the second book, Tella tries to basically pay a debt that she had acquired in the first book without us really knowing. And then the third book just came out 2 months ago. I haven't read it, but it's the ending of this big mess. Few things I liked about it. It's fast paced, like a lot of YA novels. I like that it was a good blend of dark fantasy and romance. Like the romance got a little heavier as we went along, but I wouldn't say it was everything that was going on, which is kind of nice because I'm not so big on the romance. It's nice, but I don't want it to be the main feature. They had, intrigue and they had mystery going on, and that's kind of exciting. I don't usually go for mysteries. Um, I thought the prose was pretty good, some of the best I've seen in a while. They had a lot of relatable characters. Scarlett, for example, is wary. She's cautious. She isn't very quick to trust other people. She's protective. Tella isn't likable, but she's relatable, or at least someone who's like her. She's a lot more self absorbed. She doesn't really care about how things affect Scarlett all the time. She's very selfish. Um, and I liked how they actually grew. Like, Scarlett starts off the novel, the first one, Caraval, as this ridiculously cautious individual. She doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't trust anybody. But as she goes along, she takes more risks, which I feel like is realistic. And I liked it. I'm very happy she wasn't static. Um, the series, however, can be a little redundant. Like, we hear things like Scarlett wants to protect Tella all the frickin' time, or Legend likes to make people fall in love with him all the time. And by people, I mean women. He doesn't seem gay. Could be wrong, or bi, I guess. So we hear that a lot. The first book's a little drawn out at the end. They could have kind of clipped that down. And the other concern I have, more so with the second novel, I can't really speak to the third one, obviously, and not so much with the first, is that Garber depicts really unhealthy relationships between men and women. Like, especially in the second book, the leading females are described as feeling very uncomfortable and unsafe when around the leading males, so like the prince, Dante, Julian. And it's kind of alarming, especially when you have like a young, more impressionable audience, that you would depict these kinds of relationships, because it gives the impression that women can't have a healthy relationship with a guy, or there is an unhealthy dynamic, like traditionally between a man and a woman. And that's just not the case. Do these relationships exist that are, unhealthy and borderline abusive? Yes. But is that always the case? No.
Is it framed negatively?
Yeah, everything about them like negative. Like, they're literally described as feeling powerless and unsafe on a regular basis when around the men. And it's like, well, that's, and in some contexts it makes sense, because there is one character that is, antagonist, and they're supposed to feel unsafe around that person. But they're also basically in a relationship with two other men, and they don't feel comfortable around them. And it's like, okay. So that's, one concern, which hopefully will be addressed in the final novel. Yeah, that's all I got. Had to stick a romance in there somewhere, guys. There we go.
Yeah, this when she was initially reading these books, she was talking about them and saying that they were good books, but she's like, not your kind of book. And she described it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, no, probably not my kind of books.
I know him.
All right, so my next one is, I'm debating which one to do.
Go to the top,
okay,
and we'll
go to the top. But the top's my favorite, so I don't want to. All right,
so
the top is my number one series is The Cycle of Iran and The Cycle of Galan. They're two different series, but they follow the same character, same handful of characters. And the Cycle of Iran is 3 books, and Galan right now is ongoing, and it's 5 as of right now. The 6th one should be out in the end of the summer, early fall. I'll start off with just saying that this author, Edward W. Robertson, doesn't get enough praise. I don't see him anywhere. He's not in Barnes and Nobles, and it bothers me to no end. But he releases books regularly, which is something that you don't see everybody doing. Sometimes twice a year, he'll come out with books in the same series. He's writing 2 other series at the same time. He actually answers people on Facebook, which is amazing. But the book, to me, is one of the most organic series I've ever seen at world building. It's not the most vibrant world, not the most amazingly thought out or creative world, because like that would probably go to like a Sanderson or somebody else. But the fact that with each subsequent book, the world gets a little bit bigger, and new things are introduced in a way that doesn't seem like they're coming out of nowhere. Like it just seems like the world grows little by little as their experience grows. And that's something like I was talking about earlier, or we were both talking about earlier, where like kind of there's that world, like a story growth problem that a lot of authors have, where they don't know how to make something go from being small scale to larger scale. And this one does a really good job of just building out a world book by book, building out the magic system book by book, but still relating them back. So you kind of have a grounding. The story basically follows Dante Galland and Blaise Buckler. And yes, it's an alliteration. You know, he has to be an awesome character. But one's like a brain character. He loves reading books, and the other one is like a sword fighter, and that's pretty much all he's ever done. That's all he cares about. He's like, just point me at something, I'm gonna hack it. But he's a really good sword fighter. So they kind of balance each other really well. They have a really good dynamic between them and how they talk to each other. It seems natural the way that they talk to each other, but Dante finds this book called The Cycle of Iran, which is basically a book from the gods. And there's this whole thing where he's being attacked by people to try and get the book, and he's being tried to be brought in by the people who like allowed him to get the book. It was like a test, and it's just a really cool story. And the way that he's grown while maintaining being the same character, but still growing in power, growing in knowledge, and growing in wisdom. It's just, I love the journey that I've been on, and I can't wait for the next book to come out. It's just amazing. So yeah, go out and pick up The White Trees, the name of the first book. Go out and pick that up because he needs more praise.
Does he?
Yes, he needs more praise.
I don't agree with Jeremy on this assessment. I will admit, I've only read The Cycle of Iran, which is the first book, but it was...
The White Trees, the first book.
Whatever. That's how much I hated it, okay? Yeah, it's like a grammatical nightmare. Like, this is one of the few times in my life where I would actually suggest reading or listening to a book on Audible so you don't have to notice how bad sentence structure and grammar is for the series.
The Audible narrator is Tim Gerard Reynolds, and he is the best narrator that you can find for any book. He's actually the narrator of 2 of the audiobooks on my list.
Yeah. Anyway, I found the experience quite painful. My suggestion is, if you do want to read this because of Jeremy's opinion, I can't stop you, A, but B, just don't read it. Listen to it. 'Cause that first one, ooh, that was rough.
It's fairly widely believed that the first one is the hardest to get through because of editing issues. Like if you go on like Goodreads or if you go online and look at reviews, a lot of people that still gave it 5-star ratings, that still gave it like high praise, said that the first one was a bit of a slog because of editing. And he's not an author that's been out for a while. Like he's was still learning. But if you can get through that first book, the story's still good in the first book. I still like the characters in the first book.
Generic-y.
But as the series goes on, I think it's worth the investment. Give it the first series. Give it.
Well, the first one, like I said, is your English teacher's worst nightmare. Like I don't know how else to put it. I described it in my book review, my blog, and that's kind of where I'm gonna go with this. You good with those? Good.
With the cycle, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is. I can't believe we'll have to bring this up later. Okay, so my next one is the Discworld series, novels by Terry Pratchett, who unfortunately died a few years ago. He had early onset Alzheimer's. Anyway, these books are kind of all over the place in the sense that they're satirical. They tend to be social commentaries, character commentaries, commentaries on certain aspects of our culture, like films, for example, which we'll talk about later. But essentially, they follow different characters. Sometimes you see them pop up after a few books, or you'll have a few books with one character and then like a new character, and then they'll mix in some new characters. And then anyway, I can't really give you a synopsis, is what I'm saying. But the bottom line is basically this world is flat, and it rests on the back of 4 elephants, which in turn stand on a giant turtle, which I believe is called Tatooine. Sounds about right. What I like about these books. They're satirical and funny. They leave me in a good mood. There are a few exceptions, like I Shall Wear Midnight was kind of dark, and I was like, whoa, Pratchett, did not see this coming. Don't like it. Hogfather was a bit dark too.
I really like the movie Hogfather.
Yeah, it's a movie. Some of them are movies. I like how they're thought-provoking social commentaries. It makes you think about certain types of people and certain aspects of our culture. Like there's a novel that's later on in this series called Moving Pictures, which is about film and like what it does to people, but in like a light-hearted way. I like how there's something for everyone, and I mean this quite literally. Like there is a book for like a children's picture book called Where's My Cow? I have read it, had it read to me. It's pretty interesting. It appears in Thud. It's a book that Sam Vimes reads to his son every day. So he made that into a book. There's also a YA novel, Maurice and His Educated Rodents. And then the majority of the novels in the series, I would say, are either really geared for YA, even though they're not, quote, labeled YA novels, or I guess younger adults. But I mean, I know people like in their 50s and 60s who read this stuff and love it. So it's really for everybody. And it's about a bunch of different things. If you're not, a fantasy heavy person, obviously this takes place in a fantasy world. So there is going to be a fantasy element. But there is a novel that talks about like the post office. And there's another one that talks about the construction of a train or the clack system, which I guess is kind of like a telegraph signal system with towers,
There's also a tabletop game based off of it called Clax.
which we never play correctly, but that's
We
okay.
apparently were playing it wrong the few times that we played it.
I like that there's a host of fun and relatable characters. Like I love Granny Weatherwax, for example, who basically believes in the power of her own abilities and is a no nonsense business like kind of person. She doesn't trust anything. She likes practicality and hard work. And I love that because you don't see a lot of strong female characters. Okay, she's older, but like it's fun for a woman to see a strong female lead. Well, not a lead necessarily. She's not really a lead. Sometimes she's kind of a lead, but not really. She's like a co-lead. like and then she's kind of contrasted with Nanny Ogg, who is based on the mother stereotype, like the crone, the maiden, and yeah. Granny is the crone, Nanny is the mother, and I guess that would make Margaret the maiden, although she gets married. Long story. She has several children. She loves bossing them around. She makes a lot of like kind of sexual jokes and innuendos. She's like drinking all the time. She's just a mess, but I love her. She's great. Few things. It can be hard to keep track of everybody. There's tons and tons of characters that are kind of mentioned in passing sometimes, or they'll be mentioned for, the majority of one novel, and then it'll be a few books before you see them again. Because I think he ended with over 40 in the series, at least 30. I know that. I don't know how high he got before he died. And it's hard to begin in the middle of the series because you don't know what information plays into that particular book necessarily. I mean, I started in the middle, I think, and then kind of backtracked, but that's that. This isn't the first one, but most of his books look something like this. This is Men at Arms, which is towards the end of the series, if I'm not mistaken. The first one that he wrote is Color of Magic. I have no idea where my copy got, but that would be my suggestion. Start there. It's great. He's fun. He's light. They're movies. You can listen to this on YouTube. Someone read, I think, all of them.
Yeah.
Because
I know Equal Rights is on YouTube.
Yeah, it's the third one. It's, I think, A Color of Magic, Light Fantastic, Equal Rights, Mort, and then I lose it. So look it up. It's on the internets. So
I like the cover of Thud. That's the one with like the club hitting the guy. I like that cover. The thing that I really got to give Pratchett credit for is just his world. Like the creation of his world is so you can tell that it's a world that he really loved, and that was like that meant something to him because of the like sometimes excruciating detail that you got out of it, and he just really like it was a nurturing world to him. And if you ever look up a list of like top fantasy worlds, Discworld is always on there because it's just
amazing.
It's so rich. There's so much color there. The fact that you were able to make just to my knowledge, there's 4 tabletop games out of it. There's Guards, which we played, which is really complicated, but
Not a good one.
it's not a good, like, if you're not really familiar with tabletop games, it's gonna be hard to play. The Witches,
The Witches, Clax, and
Clax.
Ankh-Morpork, which is like $378. So I don't think I'm ever gonna be playing that one.
It's gonna be that's been out of print for a while. The movies are well done, like Color Magic and Light Fantastic are like combined in one movie,
Yeah,
right?
with
And
2 parts.
I've seen that movie at least twice all the way through now.
Yeah, I made you.
And Hogfather I saw. There's also some animated ones.
Yeah, and they have Going Postal is also a live action.
I haven't seen that one. I don't watch it.
It wasn't his best work. That's all I'm gonna say. But I will not judge the movie because I have not seen it.
That was the principle behind it was like them trying to the Clack system trying to send messages faster than the postal service.
I believe so.
I think that's kind of cool.
And there was kind of like a wonky postal service and trying to get that in order. It didn't stick with me.
But I would recommend that. I'll reinforce that recommendation because it's just a cool world. Like
that's it. That's all you got. It's just a cool world.
It's a cool world. The stories are great. The humor. He writes humor better than probably any fantasy writer I've ever seen because it's hard to integrate actual funny humor into writing, like fantasy writing. Yeah. And he does a really good job of writing funny characters that have funny dialogue. I feel like there's a lot of people that write funny characters because they're like, oh, that's an interesting premise, but they're not funny when they talk. But he actually writes funny dialogue, which is cool, and it translates well to film because of that dialogue.
What else you have?
Okay, next one. Let's go with Ender's Game. The Enderverse, as it's called, consists of several novellas. There's some comic books. There's like standalone books, but the primary series are the Ender series, the Shadow Saga, the First Formic War, and the Second Formic War.
Which is boss.
Yeah. The Ender series has 5 books in it. The Shadow Saga has 5. The First Formic War is a trilogy, and the Second Formic War will be a trilogy. The 2 of them are out, and I'm waiting on the 3rd one. He does a really good job of, considering he's writing a series. It's Orson Scott Card, like just the same one from the Mither Mage. But it starts with Ender's Game, which a lot of people have read. A lot of people read when they were younger, probably. Mm-hmm. And there's also a movie that came out not too long ago, which probably people saw. It had like Harrison Ford and stuff in it, so it wasn't very. Ava Butterfield, isn't that the name of the main kid? I think that was his name. I wasn't a huge fan of the movie. Like we talked about it in the adaptation live stream. Like I wasn't a big fan, but I really love the series. Like Ender's Game is just a starting point. You can start there. I'd actually recommend you start there, even though it takes place after the First Formic War, the Second Formic War, and concurrently with the Shadow Saga. But the Ender's Game just starts it, and then there's a trilogy that follows it, where there's a whole nother alien race that's introduced called the Pequeninos, which is it's because they're from Brazil or Argentina.
Yeah, something. Yeah, the family in the First World War is from Argentina, I think, or Venezuela.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's not the same family, but because it's like 2,000 years later. But it's Spanish, some Spanish dialect. So they call them Pequeninos, which is means little piggies, because they look like little piggies.
Cute.
Yeah, they're kind of cute, but it's a really interesting dynamic. And then the First Formic War and the Second Formic War are all about the original conflicts with the buggers, the Formics, which were the alien race of insect creatures that is handled in Ender's Game. So he does a really good job of bringing relatively hard sci-fi, because there's a lot of hard sci-fi elements to it. He talks a lot about technology. He talks a lot about science. He talks a lot about very kind of nitty-gritty details, but making them interesting. Apparently more interesting than I am talking.
Sorry. It's been a long day, guys. Don't judge me.
But yeah, it's really done well. The characters are really fleshed out. And I always look forward to the new books when they come out. I would definitely recommend it highly. I haven't even finished it. I haven't read all of them. I haven't read the Shadow Saga yet. I know basically what happens in it, but I haven't read that one yet. So that's next on my list after I finish the Second Formic War.
I totally forgot about A Song of Ice and
Oh,
Fire.
we didn't even do that one yet.
Which
Yeah.
obviously starts with Game of Thrones. Not going to even bother with a synopsis because I think the majority of the world at this point has seen the show, and for a while it stuck pretty well to that. I only saw season 1 because I found it painful.
Up until about season 5, it stuck to it.
And then I hear it's painful, so don't bother. But what I liked about this, it had a good pace. I mean, sometimes it was a little slow. It had a nice host of characters. I like that they had strong female characters like Arya, who like just doesn't give a darn about what she's supposed to do as a female character, or Daenerys is pretty strong, but at the same time you also see it where she's doing her duty. Obviously she marries Khal Drogo in the first book, and then after that she's like, forget it, I'm doing whatever, and then you see her kind of go back to that, oh, I have to be womanly or whatever. But then you also have a host of these female characters who are just like constantly doing what they're told, and it's like, as a female, like I get it. Okay, obviously this is taking place in a certain time period where women didn't have, as many rights or options. But after a while, it kind of gets to be a drag, and you have characters like Sansa who are like the perfect little kid, and you're just like, oh my god, I hate Sansa. Can I say I freaking hate Sansa in the books?
The Sansa chapters are, I mean, I don't want to say bad, but I have never encountered somebody who likes them. So I mean, there's got to be an objective measurement there.
There
somewhere.
are people who like her as a character. I am just not one of them. I mean, I don't like Cersei either, but you're not supposed to.
She's well written, though. Like, if you want to look at a female character that's really well written, Cersei, despite all the things that she does that are bad and weird, like, twin incest. Yeah. But she don't take no shit. And like, she really, she does what she wants to do. Sorry, I
gotta wash it out with soap.
She really like sticks to the things that she wants to accomplish, and she cares about her children in a weird way.
She's just a questionable person.
Yeah,
questionable morals.
Sansa, I think, is building up to the point, like they're gonna build her up to the point where she figures out how to like play the game and things like that. It's just taking a really long time to get there. The transformation in the series was so quick. Like, they're not waiting like the books are waiting to kind of build her up. They were just like, all of a sudden, wow, Sansa knows what she's doing. And so it's just taking too long to get there. I like the male characters too. I like Jon. I like Eddard.
But he died. I like Syrio Forel, but everyone knows he died. Sean Bean's character, he dies. Yeah, Syrio Forel was fun.
Yeah, I liked him in like the 2 episodes that he was in the show,
and like the 1 chapter in the book.
He was in 2 chapters. He was in the one where he was teaching her water dancing,
and then when
then when he fights the guards. Yeah. Hey, it's off. It's like off page. I never know, but.
He dies.
The lore is really well done. Like, he really thought out the lore. The fact that he's basically written 2 encyclopedias after that, like
and the history of the Targaryens too, Fire and Blood.
Yeah, Fire and Blood. He wrote,
which is apparently going to be a 2-parter. The first one's like 700 some odd pages. I don't know.
What does it go up to?
It goes off to the Spring War or the Summer War.
So does it get to like the Dance with Dragons and all that? Like,
yes, they already did that, I believe. Okay.
Yeah. Like, there's a lot of, like, just the fact that you can sit here and talk about the world like it's a real world. Like, there's a history that has a timeline. Every house has a lineage. Like, he really liked building this world out, sometimes I think to his detriment. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's taking him so long to finish it, because he just built something that's too big.
Yeah. Biggest detriment to the series is obviously that George R. R. Martin is not a very swift writer, does not stick to his timetable or his schedule. I would be excited and happy to read this book series to its completion within 20 years. If at all.
It would be nice to get the last
I might give up on it. I'm just saying.
And I also don't like the fact that he releases sample chapters. That kind of bothers me, because it's kind of like you're just dangling it out there, and then I partake in a lot of like the A Song of Ice and Fire YouTube channels and things like that, and they talk about it, and there's like spoilers and stuff in it, and it's like, I want to experience it once I'm experiencing it as a whole piece. I don't want to get it like drips and drabs of little character moments. the my last book on my thing on my list is Red Rising, the Red Rising trilogy, and this is another book that you didn't like because of the grammar.
I mean, it's not as bad as The Cycle of Iran, but not a lot of properly structured sentences. But I think it is a stronger book and story than The Cycle of Iran. I will say that.
The funny thing is the reason why I ended up on on Red Rising is I was looking for a book that was a lot like Hunger Games because I had just finished the Hunger Games series, the books, not the movies.
Gotta qualify that.
Yeah, because the books were a lot better than the movies by a large margin. My sister actually recommended Red Rising because it has a similar premise in the first book where they're in this academy on Mars and he has to represent a house and
Who's he?
Sorry, the main character Darrow
Thank you.
has to represent a house and kind of fight it out with the people in there. So it's kind of like a Hunger Games-esque scenario. The premise behind it is very early on in the book, so no real spoilers. But like Darrow is a red, which is the lowest class of society. They're basically looked at as the people who just do like slave labor.
They're basically slaves. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and they were the first race to go to Mars, like the first class to go there, and they were sent there for generations under the assumption that they were preparing Mars to be like terraformed for the other colors, the softer colors, to come and live there once they've kind of done all the hard work because they're reds are strong and reds are tough. And they've been there for I think 200, 250 years, something like that, a long time.
Wow.
And it turns out that Mars has been terraformed for hundreds of years, and they've just been exploiting them for free labor while still dangling this like heroic backstory to them. So that's where the title kind of comes in, Red Rising. It's like a Darrow leading kind of like a revolution against the caste system led by the Golds, who are like kind of very Roman-esque. They all have names like Augustus and things like that. They're very like reminiscent of old Rome. But it's sci-fi and it does a really good job of. You never went beyond Red Rising, right? You just did. Yeah,
I just did Red Rising, and I was like, nope.
The next book is Morning Star, I believe.
Right.
It was Golden Sun, then Morning Star, and then Iron Gold, which I haven't finished, which kind of ticks it down to the bottom of my list because I wasn't able to finish Iron Gold. But the original trilogy, which was the original intention, it does a really good job of the story expanding and not losing its point. It just gets bigger conflicts that are handled really well, and the characters are really cool. The supporting cast of characters is probably the best part of the book, even better than, especially in the first book, they're better than Darrow. Darrow gets better as he goes on a little bit, but I don't like Darrow through a lot of the first book, but the people around him are cool. The antagonists are cool. A lot of his classmates in the house, the Mars house, are really cool. They have like quirks and interesting personalities. So that kind of carries you through on it. The fighting is cool with the razor. They use like this like long whip like weapon that they can change into different shapes, which is really cool. So it adds an interesting style of sword fighting. So yeah, we're done with our list.
That was long.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. All right. We're going to rank them now. So I'm going to knock. So we're only doing a top 5, guys.
And we have 8 books.
Yeah, because I did 4 and you did 4. Series. Yeah. Remember, they're series, guys. I'm going to knock Carval off of mine because I didn't like it as much. That leaves me with Game of Thrones, the Arithmetist, and the Discworld series. What do you think you're going to knock off your list?
I think I'm going to knock off Red Rising.
Okay.
And it's hard.
See,
I feel like you want me to knock The Cycle off.
I would, because I think it's.
I'm gonna begrudgingly knock The Cycle off of the the list.
Well, this is a joint venture.
Yeah.
You're stuck with my opinion.
But high recommendation. So that leaves on your list Song of Ice and Fire, Rhythmatist, and Discworld.
Yeah.
I think I really love Rhythmatist. I feel like it takes some hits because it's only one book.
Yeah, it's not technically a series right now, so maybe we should just disqualify it on the grounds that it's technically not a series
We
right
can
now.
revisit it once the second book comes out because there is I doubt it because it's Sanderson, but there is a possibility that the second book kind of knocks it into honorable mention category, just like The Rook did.
Well, yeah, he said he's having issues with, or not having issues, but he didn't expect to have to do as much research for the next installment of the story about like Aztec and like I think like more Mexican-based cultures. So that's why it's not out yet. Apparently, it's his most requested book.
Yeah, I mean, because the first book was so amazing.
Well, yeah. So we'll knock that off the lovely list. So that just leaves me with the Song of Ice and Fire and the Discworld, which we said. And then, well, the Ender Game series, I thought, to be honest, the prose in Ender's Game itself was kind of clunky. I mean, I think it was the first thing he wrote, like in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been writing for a while, but it was the first one that stuck. It was the first
Okay.
one that he actually got
Alright.
like a.
So basically, his first
yeah.
book. Okay.
And it was adapted from a novella. It was originally a short story that he expanded out because he had more ideas and he wanted to make it a full novel.
And I mean, I like the first Formic War. I thought that was great. It was the first with Bingwin, right? Minus Bingwin. I don't know.
Minus Bingwin, yeah.
I don't know why he was there.
Bingwin was like him trying to insert Ender into the first Formic War, and it wasn't.
It didn't work out. So I really haven't read anything else by him. So I have mixed feelings. Like he's not bad, but he isn't strong throughout. You know what I mean?
I think that like the Discworld, I think he deserves credit for the fact that there's a lot of books that he's written and they've withstood kind of like Ender's Game came out in the 70s. So it's kind of and it's still
I was like a decade off. You could have corrected me.
Yeah. I mean,
come on, man.
Yeah, it was written in the 70s and it's still kind of people still read it today, which kind of deserves some credit. I would put it behind the Discworld. I think Discworld should be number one just because of the care that went into the world and the fact that there's a lot of elements that came from Discworld that are in other things. Like if anybody's read It from Stephen King, the whole thing with the turtle with the world on its back, there's like a whole thing in there, the giant turtle, the cosmic turtle. Spoilers if you haven't read it, but there's like you see it a lot. I feel like even if you haven't read Discworld, you've seen that image of the turtle with the elephants.
So we have that probably at the top. So we're gonna put Ender's Game beneath it somewhere.
Yeah, either I think it would be either 2 or 3. I think the only debate for it might be Song of Ice and Fire. Where would you?
Which one's this one?
Mistborn.
Okay, so I definitely think a Song of Ice and Fire is better than Mistborn, just because the prose in Mistborn is so clanky. Although a Song of Ice and Fire is a lot gorier. Sometimes it has like unnecessary gratuitous violence, especially I feel like more on the first book than the later ones, which might not appeal to everybody. And like some of it's kind of gross. I mean, incest obviously isn't cute.
He really likes incest. Like he has a thing with it. Like all the Targaryens come from incest, and the main inciting factor of the entire story is
incest.
Based on incest.
Yeah, well, there's the whole exceptionalism thing, which is explained in Fire and Blood. But anyway, the Targaryens. So
that's hard.
Yeah, it really is. So wait, we only have 4 things left.
If we're cutting Rhythmatist because it's not really a series, we only have Discworld, Mistborn, Ender's Game, and Song of Ice and Fire.
So I guess your series is making it on there. Number 5. This is non-negotiable. It only made it onto this list because I'm being a kind, generous soul.
Oh, you're saying the cycle makes it on? Nice.
It doesn't deserve to be there, guys. Rhythmatist is way better, but since it's technically not a series yet, but is a series in name. Yeah. All right. So that leaves Mistborn, Song of Ice and Fire, and Ender's Game. Well, I've read all of Mistborn.
I think A Song of Ice and Fire should be number 2.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's stronger than Mistborn, and then Mistborn, and then Ender's Game. To be honest.
Yeah.
We're actually in agreement, kids.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So here's our top 5 that you can't read because it's backwards.
So number 1, Discworld. Number 2, Song of Ice and Fire. Number 3, you can read it.
Oh, Mistborn trilogy.
That was too delayed.
Number 4, the Ender's Game saga, and number 5, I'll make you say it.
The Cycle of Iran and Glend.
Now, if you went onto like Reddit or something and read through their list of top fantasy series, you can actually see Sanderson made it on to the top 10 3 times.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah. He's kind of an up and coming. I think this list one day give him another 10, 15 years. That top 5 might be all Sanderson with just the pace that he's
We
going.
should just rank his books at some point.
That would be awesome.
Oh, we already know. We have our favorites. All right. We'll get there eventually. Anyway, thanks for coming, guys. I had fun. Did you have fun?
I had fun. Obviously, the fact that it lasted over an hour, we had to have a good time.
It's a rule we just made up. All right. See you next week, guys. Bye.
Bye.